You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online, and my name is Andrew Mackay-Smith. Hope you're well. The interview subject coming up for you, if you can't tell by the podcast description, and of course you can, but I'm going to say it anyway, it's Bjorn Strid, aka Speed, from the band's Soilwork, and the one that is the reason for the conversation right now, the Flight Orchestra. Now, the Flight Orchestra have a brand new album out. It'll be released on the 5th of March via Nuclear Blast. And what's it called? I have it prepared. It's called Aeromantic. There you go. We talk about that through the conversation. But you know me, if you've been listening to this podcast series for long enough, we don't just talk about that. We talk about a bunch of other stuff. Speed's a good bloke. He's a very creative soul, and he's a great interview subject. So here he is. Speed Strid from the Flight Orchestra.
Hello, it's Bjorn.
Here he is. How are you, mate?
Hello. How are you, mate? Hey, how are you? I'm good.
Well, this is our third or fourth chat, I think, at this point in time, which really sort of hints at your boundless creativity.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm all over the place, really. Yeah,
well, that's one way of putting it. But
yeah.
I mean, really, I'll kick things off now for you because I know you've got the... have you got somebody after me calling through in 15 minutes' time?
No, there's nobody after you, but we're going to do our last rehearsal before the tour starts tomorrow in London, so
sweet.
I have a pretty packed schedule anyway, so... But I'm glad I get to talk to you for a bit, so...
Awesome, mate. All right, no worries. Well, I've kind of already asked the first question. I mean, that's the first thing that I think I said to John when he mentioned that there was another opportunity to chat to you, which is lovely, by the way. But where on earth do you get the time to do everything that you do? Because between touring and crafting music, how do you do it all?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, last year was pretty insane because we did everything at the same time, both with Soilwork and Night Flight. We did even 3 festivals, same day, both bands, just 1 hour in between, which was absolutely insane. Yeah, talk about Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, it's just crazy. But I mean, what we're gonna do now is to divide the album cycles and touring cycles a little bit, and then I think we're gonna be able to pull it off. And then again, it's so much fun, you know. So it's just the logistics and traveling that can be extremely tiring. But as far as creating music and you know, playing it live, it's all good. You know, it's just about getting there. So this summer, I mean, this year is pretty much going to be about the Night Flight Orchestra, and we'll just have a few shows with Soilwork here and there, and releasing 3 singles, and that's about it. So, yeah. But as far as creating the music, and I mean, we never really stop. We always have recording sessions, you know, for a weekend, or you know, 5 days or 10 days every now and then. So we never really stop writing. We never really stop recording. And so we never really feel sort of, you know, when it's time to approach a new album. We just go for it, and it's really like a labor of love, you know, if you will. So it's, but it is insane on paper. I mean, it's like what the hell is Bjorn doing? What is this? And then of course David too, because he's in both bands.
Sure, yeah.
And he writes even more stuff, you know, for the Night Flight Orchestra. We write pretty much 50-50 for Soilwork, but Night Flight, he does like maybe 70%, and he's also a doctor and a father of 2. So, I mean, it's pretty insane. But yeah, so far so good, I would say.
Well, you mentioned Jekyll and Hyde in there, and I got to say, having known you work so well from Soilwork, and I know we talked about this a couple of years ago when you first got Night Flight Orchestra up off the ground, but I actually feel like as if Night Flight Orchestra is becoming the thing. I could be wrong, but, you know, it feels like you're morphing into that in your... Like, we're all over 40, so let's face it, we're not getting any younger. But I feel like this is a bit of an easier direction for you to go in because the music is, frankly, more listenable, and it probably appeals to a broader audience. So do you feel the same way?
Yes and no. I mean, sometimes maybe it feels like it's easier to relate to Night Flight Orchestra at times, but it's also maybe something I could actually grow old with. I was gonna say that sounds extremely boring, but
I get it.
But then again, you know, I'm 41 now, and I just love having both bands, you know, because I get to do everything. You know, I feel very balanced musically, and and Soilwork has gradually become darker, I would say, more intense and melancholic ever since we started the Night Flight Orchestra. And I think that's how I want Soilwork to be, because before, we were experimenting a lot, and I think we found something really new with the double album, The Living Infinite, and then, The Ride Majestic came, and then Verklighet, and so that's exactly what I want to do with Soilwork, and now I have the Night Flight Orchestra as well, because I couldn't channel all my influences into one band before, so it's just making sense, and it would be really sad if I had to start focus on one band, So, I'm going to try my very best and do both, because I love both bands and they mean so much to me, and they represent me in a very good way, how I am as a person. So
there you go. Yeah, there's a lot of yourself in there. And you are 5 albums into your career with Night Flight Orchestra, so Sometimes the World Ain't Enough, Skyline Whispers, Internal Affairs, Amber Galactic, which I love, by the way, Amber Galactic. It's a great album. And the new one, Aeromantic, here it is. And I haven't lived with it for that long, but I know it's a great album because you do craft great songs. But you've almost answered my question here with your statement previously. But I imagine that there's far more than meets the eye with Night Flight Orchestra, and indeed Aeromantic, than what we're listening to. So what else do fans need to know who are just taking the music at face value?
This album, it's definitely going to take you on a journey, listening through it. And even though we have all these sort of gimmicks and stuff, maybe people see it as like, are you guys like serious about this? Like, yes, we are 100%, but we love to have like a full concept, and we love sort of capturing the golden era of flying, with everything that goes with it.
There you go.
So it's sort of travel romance, whether it being on a train and a car, or being in the air, or being in space even. That's what the very foundation of this band, to create a soundtrack of being in motion, and I think our music is extremely cinematic, I would say. I sometimes call our sound sort of cinematic rock, if I want to be really pretentious, but I think it really fits, because it creates so many pictures in your mind, and I think a lot of people feel that as well when they listen to us, and maybe some of the lyrical topics might be sort of cliche when you see them at first, but if you really dig deep, it's some really amazing stuff, and some of it is based on personal experiences as well, and so there's a lot to discover. It's very detailed music. You can listen to it over and over and over again, still find new things, and that's
I agree.
That's what we like.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there, and I was going to ask you this question a bit later, but I might be a fan of heavy metal. I'm a fan of all sorts of music, but one of the genres that I'm really getting into and have been getting into for the last decade or so is synth wave. Now, I hope you've heard of that, because a lot of your music sounds like rock and metal meets synth wave. So, you're a composer at the end of the day. You're not just a musician, you're a composer, but have you thought about leaning into some of the purely synth stuff?
Not necessarily. It's become extremely hip, with synthwave, and you hear a lot of it, and some of it is really good too. And
Kavinsky and the French stuff is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt that we had that even before, that became sort of a trend. But then again, it's like we get inspired by good things we hear, But I think we found our own way of sort of capturing sort of that 80s dreamy feel, and I think we mix it up in a really interesting way, For example, on this album, we have Transmissions, which is very sort of dreamy and sort of melancholic, but it has that sort of driving in a car like through a big city and it's raining, and the whole thing,
the
that
Blade
sort
Runner
of
thing,
captures it. Yeah, exactly. That's what it gives you. So I think it's we're sort of expressing pretty much the same thing, but in a different take, I guess, in a different way. But of course, it's very inspiring to do stuff that doesn't have any guitars at all sometimes, and that's what we've gone for maybe a little bit on this album as well, and it's interesting to experiment with just the keyboards and vocals and really like naked sort of stuff, and strip down. So I think this album is more balanced in that sense as well,
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can certainly hear that coming through. And look, at this next question, I wouldn't hesitate to state for a fact you've been asked this question by just about every Australian journalist, and I think you know where
Mm.
I'm headed. But the second cut
Yes.
is called Divinals, and look, I'm a
Yeah.
covers musician, so I've played plenty of Divinals stuff. But is there a link to the Australian band Divinals with that cut, or is it
There.
just
Yeah, there is a link. And basically, what happened was, I mean, watching Divinal's Us Festival performance 1983 in America is one of our favorite things to do before going on stage,
okay?
because it's such a brilliant performance.
Wow,
And
okay.
that's that was the way I actually discovered Divinals, maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. And I mean, I've heard the big single, I Touch Myself before, which was even big in Sweden. So, but
Yep.
I somehow didn't discover the other stuff, and then we watched Us Festival, and really like, oh my god, this is amazing. Especially the voice in town is just a stunning
Yes.
performance.
Yeah.
So I don't know, we got influenced. That was one of those bands that sort of even like, this is what we want to capture with this band as well. That sort of vibe, the stomp, and I don't know. It was very inspiring, and I was actually at my parents'. I don't know when it was I wrote this song, but maybe in September, and I've been listening to Divinals, and I was like, wow, I felt really inspired to write something, and then I wrote Divinals. I came up with this melody, and wrote the whole thing in 2 hours. And when it was done, it's like, well, this doesn't sound much like Divinals at all, but what the hell? I'm just gonna, that's gonna be the working name for it, at least, because that's what inspired me in the first place. So it doesn't matter. And then when we came to, the album was mixed and we were going to mastering, it's like, and I was asking David, so I don't know, I can't come up with a different name for this song, and it's like. And he said, like, no, you should just call it Divinals. That's a great band. It's a great tribute, even though it doesn't really sound like them. But, that's what inspired you in the first place. So
Killer, yeah.
that's what we did. So,
Well, as an
there it is.
Aussie, thanks for acknowledging the band, because I feel the same way you do about them, having played their stuff so often and seeing the audience reaction whenever they're played. But of course, in a lot of Europe and the United States, they're not that familiar. They're only familiar with "I Touch Myself," the big hit. But their
Yeah.
back catalogue is just, it's Oz rock. I mean, yeah, I couldn't show anybody a better example of Oz rock than that
No,
band.
it's fantastic.
It's it. And there was heaps of bands that had that sound, but never the vibe. Never the
Yeah.
vibe that Chrissy Amphlett brought, and John McEntee, the guitarist, what he had.
Yeah, fantastic stuff.
Yeah, I don't know whether you know, but John McEntee tried to get a version of the Vinyls up off the ground last year, or maybe the year before. And
Really?
yeah, it fell over because the singer he had, I can't remember her name now, but she was an American chick, and she certainly had it, but he said, due to unforeseen circumstances, this won't go ahead. But all I can imagine was that the young lady, the American chick that he recruited to perform Chrissy's parts, saw the response online, how devoted and how as much a part of the Australian music scene Chrissy is considered, that she freaked out a little bit. Now, I don't know shit from Shinola, but I imagine that's probably what happened, because, man,
Yeah.
she is not the person you want to go up on stage and imitate and fuck up.
No. No.
And I felt for her, to be honest with you, and I don't think John
Oh,
probably
yeah.
explained to her exactly how as much of an embedded a part of the Australian music scene Chrissy actually is to this day.
Yeah.
So
It's brilliant.
yeah. But mate, just with going back to Night Flight Orchestra, you mentioned David writing about 70% of the cuts there. How does it work though when you're writing songs? Does David send through songs via Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever to the rest of the band members, or do you do the same thing and just get them to learn stuff, or how does the songwriting work and the learning?
Well,
of
we
songs?
just, bounce tracks back and forth. David is extremely productive, and he writes a lot of songs. I mean, he probably writes a song a week, to say. And
Jesus, yeah.
so there's a lot. I mean, we're building up quite a vault of songs.
I'll
by
say,
now.
my God, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we send tracks, sit at home. We write separately usually, and then we send the tracks. But then whenever we feel we have something really interesting, we book, like a long weekend in the studio or, something like that, and record a couple of tracks. So we sort of spread it out instead of like booking, so, like 6 weeks in the studio. Okay, let's record the new album. I don't know. It just, I've done that too much, and it tends to get sort of, I don't know, sometimes kill the creativity, being, you're so excited the first week and the second week, and then it just like, you're in the same place. I think we've learned from that and decided to sort of spread it out instead and have sessions. I just love that. We meet for a weekend, we cook, we drink, and record a couple of tracks. It's awesome, and the vibe is great. So
yeah, killer. Yeah.
That's usually, but I mean, the demos that we create are very much sort of like skeletons, and then when we take it to the studio, that's really where it happens, and they sometimes turn out to be something completely different than the demo in the end. So it is a group effort in the end, very much.
Look, I hope you don't mind me asking the next question, but we both knew Ralph Santola, you far better than I did, and the last time we actually had a chat, unbelievably, and I can't help but think there's something out there beyond the ether that draws people together, but I think it was the night before he was taken off life support, if you can believe it, that our last conversation took place, and we both reminisced on Ralph, and we weren't sure what was going to happen then, but it was very clear the next day what happened, and I've since had a chat to Bill Hudson, his other good mate, about him as well, but mate, as I say, if you feel uncomfortable talking about it, tell me to stop and we'll talk about something else. But now that it's been a year and a half or so, can you share some more of your memories about Ralph?
I mean, he's just so greatly missed. I still cannot believe he's gone. It's like, I mean, because his mom is always posting pictures of him. It's like, oh, it's Ralph. It's like, and it just hits you again. It's like, he's gone, and he was just so brilliant. And I keep, laughing when I think about him sometimes, because what would Ralph say, And I think a lot of people can relate that knew him. It's like, because Ralph always had his own way, of putting things, and extremely intelligent and funny, and like I've said before, he was like the only reason to actually be on Facebook. It was because of Ralph. Everything else that just doesn't matter, So I miss him so much. I mean, he was living at my place for 2 weeks, very close to where I'm at right now. I'm actually looking out the window and I see the ocean, and my house was right down there, and he was there for 2 weeks, living with me. And he was, it was in a pretty rough shape, but we had so much fun. We could talk about just about anything. So it's, just brilliant.
Yeah, one of the things he shared with me about the friendship that he had with you is he was fairly right wing and you're fairly left wing, fairly progressive, and he talked about the conversations that you guys had where you disagree but you're always mates, and I know he really appreciated that, and it was something that I don't think he couldn't understand why people in the rest of the world couldn't be similar. Have different political opinions, but you still couldn't be mates. But you guys managed to do that, and I think from my perspective, and I'm fairly right wing myself, but a lot of my mates are fairly left wing, and we managed to do something similar. But when I look on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else, the world's so divided at the moment. I think your friendship is a really good example of how the world can work.
Absolutely, yeah. I thought that was beautiful. It's like, wow, we can talk about these things, and we're not punching each other out. It's something we understand each other, we respect each other, and even get inspired from each other. I mean, I'm listening to his points, and sometimes I felt maybe he's right, and maybe he felt the same way, but that's what we need to do. Otherwise, everything's going to get so polarized. It's just not going to work. That's the only way to go. So thanks for bringing that up.
No, that's all right, brother. Yeah, I'm glad you feel comfortable talking about it. I get, I had 2 conversations with him, and we communicated over email and Facebook, and and when I talked to Bill did a really lovely thing. I've got to say, I did a I don't know what you call it. It certainly wasn't an obituary, but it was a reflection on Ralph Santola. And Bill told me that he sent it through to Ralph's mother, and that meant a lot to me, man. And I think what I notice about Ralph is there's a spirit of community around him. People like you and I who have only ever spoken to each other over the phone, and Bill, we all sort of are able to find common points that we just loved about the bloke, and we just have it's just a really lovely memory for us all to have in the spirit of Ralph, I think,
Yeah, absolutely. We need to carry on that Ralph legacy for sure.
Mate, I don't think I can top
Yeah.
that question, so I'll leave it there. I'll let you get on to the next thing and have a beer or a cup of tea or whatever you're doing. But look, thanks for making the music that you've made. And, look, no doubt, with the way you're bloody going, mate, no doubt we'll be having a conversation the next 6 to 12 months anyway. So I look
I
forward
hope
to
so
it.
too, and hope. Yeah, cool, very cool, and I hope we get to tour Australia with the Night Flight Orchestra as well. Do sort of like a hotel tour, like a classic
Yeah, I want
Aussie
that,
pub
man.
hotel. Yeah, that would have been
I got to say, man, yeah, I missed you guys when you came through last for soil work. Just I got 2 young kids,
right.
so it's very hard for me to get out, man. But if you guys tour
Yeah, I
with
understand.
NFO, man, I'm not going to miss it. I can assure you.
No, yeah. Let's hope it's going to happen. I'll really try to push for it, and hopefully people pick up the album and request songs on radio, and spread the word, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, agreed. All right, I'll do my bit, mate. But look, congratulations on everything as always, mate. And no doubt we'll catch up soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for calling.
No worries, brother. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
You too, mate.
Bye-bye.
Bye. You've been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. That means I'm Andrew Mackay-Smith, and the interview subject that you've just tuned in to hear from is Bjorn Speed Strid from the outfits Soilwork, and the reason for this chat, the Night Flight Orchestra. Thanks for listening.